Hello, social media world, and thank you so much for joining our live stream today. This session is part of our new live stream series called Voices in Sight, a series dedicated to uncovering the experiences behind corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the market trends that are influencing DE&I in the workplace. I am your host, Eliza Singleton, a social media specialist here at Momentive. Now, if you missed our first episode in this series, don't worry. Head to our Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn page at Momentive AI to learn all about our workplace equity IQ solution. But today's session, we are talking about the future of human resources. Now, the past year and a half has had a significant impact on how human resource professionals operate, but has also showed us that diversity, equity, and inclusion teams can no longer work in silos if organizations really want to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in their workplace. Now, discussing this topic with me today are some very special guests, but before I introduce them, if you have not heard the big news, SurveyMonkey is now Momentive. So we are a leader in agile experience management that empowers decision makers to act with speed and agility. We offer a wide range of solutions that measure and track experiences across everyone who interacts with your organization. But today we're focusing really on that middle solution, employee experience. Now, again, joining me today to talk about the future of human resources are some very exciting guests. First, we have Antoine Andrews, who is our Chief Diversity and Social Impact Officer here at Momentive, as well as Becky Cantieri, who is our Chief People Officer at Momentive. And I'm also very excited to introduce Erica Johnson, who is the Head of Diversity, Equity, and Belonging at Chime. So welcome, Antoine, Erica, and Becky.
Hello.
Hello. We're very excited to have you to talk about this topic. And, just to get things started, I'd love to hear about each of your careers. So Becky and Erica, I know you both have an extensive history in your careers working within human resources. So before 2020, how did that industry really operate?
Yeah, so I started my human resources career at Nordstrom way back, and then spent about 11 years at Yahoo in various HR roles to include talent acquisition, mergers and acquisition, and then a more traditional HR business partner role before moving over to Momentive into my first kind of leading the whole function of HR. And I have all of the traditional HR functions from recruiting to learning and development, places or real estate. And at one time I had the diversity, equity, and inclusion team when we first started our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts reporting into people. And now I'm excited to be partnering on those efforts with Antoine, which we'll talk about more.
Awesome. What about you, Erica?
So I started in HR some time back. I started HR working for attorneys. And nothing gets you ready for HR like doing HR for law firms. So I would say that prepped me on the very technical side, and then got into tech and was with my last company, Nitro, before we had a wonderful exit event until 2020. And in 2020, after leading the function globally for Nitro, I thought that I would want to take my next role in a more focused way around particularly DEI work, or at Chime we call it DEB, and the I is the belonging. So that's been the change for me in the last year, and I've been really enjoying this role. So thrilled to be here chatting with both Becky and Antoine about this today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And Antoine, I know you have a long history of primarily working with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So before 2020, how did your role really overlap with human resources?
Yeah, and I'm glad to be here with Becky and Erica. And so thank you, Eliza. I think one of the things for me, I've been fortunate enough, and 3 of my major stops I've actually reported into the HR function, whether it was Bristol Myers Squibb, Gap Inc., or Nike. So I've always been, and Becky's heard me say this before, I've always been HR adjacent in my entire career. So it's always been an overlap. And so it gives me a good insight into the work that the great work that the team does across all the spectrums that Becky has. And so I think the one thing I will say, the one stop where I did not have that overlap, we didn't see as much traction. And so I think for me, it's been a key component in being able to drive and being a part of driving outcomes. I think the other thing is, you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, you think about anyone on a people team or an HR team, the key here is that employees matter. And so being able to partner with those leaders and those teams have been critical for me because we're all concerned about our employees and employee experience.
Right, absolutely. So, Becky and Antoine, how do your roles really intersect today when it comes to recruiting new talent, supporting career growth of employees, and really just maintaining an inclusive work culture?
Yeah. So when you say the word intersect, I think of a four-way stop where everybody comes to a four-way stop and then everyone kind of politely yields to the person in front of them. And while we are very polite and work really, really well together, I don't think of us as meeting at an intersection. I think of us as true partners, because the majority of the impact we hope to achieve at Momentive is done in partnership. Everything my team works on, from recruiting to learning and development to reimagining work, has benefited from the partnership with Antoine. His insight, his perspective, his curiosity and ability to ask questions has made all of the work better. So, if anything, again, in my perspective, it's not this four-way stop concept. It's like we pull up to the start line together and we're like, are you ready for this? This is going to be new, different, interesting. And we always get to better outcomes when we work on things together. And I think part of that is due to that adjacent experience that Antoine has had, and the way that we both come to the table as these roles are very complementary to one another versus, running in parallel to one another, but doing their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. And, I think Becky was looking at my notes as I was thinking about preparing for this, because it's exactly it. I agree. Becky and I talk frequently, whether it's, on Zoom. I was going to say on the phone, but we're not doing that. But on Zoom, via Slack, whatever the case is, we talk a lot, and that's important. To your point, Becky, we are actually doing this together. And so that's important to do that. The other thing is Becky has an amazing set of leaders on her team. And what's great about that is I spend a lot of time with them as well, talking about and providing my perspectives and insights. And one of the things I'll say is that the role model of this is what it's going to be from the start is, before I even started, Becky and her team were reaching out to get my insights and perspectives, which sends a signal to someone joining a new organization of your insights matter right away. And so it's really a key component for how we work together. And I think one of the things is that our belief around, it's not just us and our teams, it's the managers and the folks that are leading the teams as well. So we have that perspective of how do we make sure we're moving everybody along on this. And I love the way you outline that intersection, because I agree, we're not meeting at an intersection. We're driving up and pulling out and getting out, walking around each one of the intersections to make sure people understand that. So I think our partnership one is that allows us to share insights across the board. And I'll say this, we don't always agree, but I think when we don't, I think it's important that we know that we're trying to get to the best point, and so we're pushing each other to be great. So it's a partner that I love to have, and so I'm glad to be here with her.
Right, absolutely. It sounds like such an amazing partnership. And Erica, how does your role overlap with human resources at Chime?
Very similarly. I loved actually hearing both of their sentiments in that. It was actually quite touching.
I know.
Just want to say that.
Yeah.
And I would say similarly, I actually report into our head of people and talent, Chief People Officer Beth Steinberg, but work very closely with her and also the rest of the people leaders team, our directors of people partners, and as well as our head of talent as well. Similarly, I think Chime is growing rapidly. We're in high growth right now, extremely high growth, and we're laying a lot of foundations in this work. And I think, again, the partnership with HR and DEI/DEP is so important when you're doing that. So I'm meeting with my fellow people leaders constantly to make sure, as we're building a foundation around our hiring, around our goal setting, around our promotions, equity, whatever we're looking at, that we're doing it in partnership together.
Right. Absolutely. That's so fascinating to hear how all of these roles are intersecting. And for those who are listening right now, please drop in our comments, what team you work on and where you're, coming from. But going into our next question, I know we're all aware of the events of 2020, from Black Lives Matter protests to Stop Asian Hate, not to mention, a global pandemic. So how did the events of 2020 really start to affect diversity programming and overall HR strategies?
So I'll jump in there, and I think from a diversity professional perspective, and not to speak for all of my colleagues, but I think 2020 gave many of us a platform and a voice to share our ideals and perspectives that I think that may have not fully been appreciated before 2020. And I think, what's exciting about that is the folks have taken advantage of that to really drive and push towards, what are some of the outcomes we want to see, whether it's around talent, whether it's around lived experience within the organization, which is great. But for me, I think the one thing that has jumped out has been critical is since 2020, learning around historical context and inequities has been truly important and driven home at a level I've never seen before throughout my career. And I remember, 5 or 7 years ago, you actually had to push to get some of that learning in because it was touchy feely. And that's important now. I did some research, and one of the things that I saw that talked about civil rights titles and jumped 330% since, June in some points. And then as well as, books about discrimination also jumped 245%, I think, in that first week at post George Floyd's death. So I think that piece has really been able to drive around education, which is critical.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would add, if I had to think of one word, I would just say substantively, it has impacted our worlds and our roles. It's brought great focus as well. When the pandemic hit, we went into this mode of health and safety was the most important thing, taking care of our team, transitioning to a virtual work format. And for many of us, that was a pretty radical departure from the way or the mode that we were working previously. And then you throw in George Floyd's murder, Asian hate, it brings focus. It brings importance to the work that we're doing to take care of our teams wherever they may be. It really focus and change were just like the monikers of 2021, doing what's really important, doing what really matters, doing what's critical to take care of our employees was just the mantra of the year. Learning was critical to that, being open-minded, demonstrating resilience and demonstrating empathy and compassion for employees who are having very, very different lived experiences based on what was going on in the world. It just brought all of that into focus for so many of us. So it's been quite a year, and it's given us so much opportunity to change the way we've been doing things in the past, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think I would say Antoine and Becky have both been looking at my notes because I would say all of that. Like, I think it's the learning. I think it's the focus. I think it's the involvement. I do feel like this used to, in my mind, kind of belong here, and people kind of needed to go to HR for something or needed to go to DEI for something. Or, oh, the DEI team or the HR team are asking this of us, or asking us to get involved in this, or asking us to learn about this, or asking us to focus on this. And now I have people putting time on my calendar I want to know what we're doing. I want to know how I can be a part of this, which is very interesting coming right into a role. And I'm like, well, I don't even know everyone's name here yet. But so I don't know why we're doing right this moment, but I'm glad to get your name down and let you know how you can get involved with this work. And I think having all of the workforce wanting to be involved, all the types of leaders, interns, everyone wanting to be involved in what we're doing or how we're driving this is refreshing and inspiring to see. So
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of on that note, Erica, we also, have, aside from 2020, we have 5 generations entering the workforce right now. So, Generation Z was certainly a driving force in a lot of the movements we spoke to earlier. But of course, other generations really helped start the foundation for a lot of that change. So how does having, such a diverse workforce right now affect company culture and diversity programming?
I think it's the key to really driving things forward. I think Gen Z is very open and communicate very clearly what their expectations are. And I think they're able to do that because I think we talked about this previously. Like they're able to do that because of previous generations taking on that fight. What do we want to see in the workforce? There's a lot of that that's already been laid by boomers and by millennial, but I think Gen Z, with the ability with social media, with the openness of social media, I think they're all very clear and aligned and don't hide their voices. And so that is driving a lot in this area as well as around their expectations and what they want to see from companies. And I think it's a great thing to, be holding us to.
And I definitely get.
Go ahead, Antoine.
Nope, you go, Becky.
I was just going to add to that, it's never been more true than today that one size just does not fit all at work. Your point of having multi-generations in the workforce, but it's true of so many other cohorts of team members that we have inside of our companies. They all want to make an impact. They all want to be empowered. They all want to share their voice. And it's incumbent upon us to amplify those voices, listen intently to what's going on, and design a work environment and programs that meet people where they are, because not everyone is in the same place, and that's okay. And we're richer off, we're all better off for it. It doesn't mean it's always easy, because their needs differ greatly, right? The need of a Gen Z employee versus someone who's a boomer is very, very different, but they can work together in the same environment. They can learn from another, they can teach one another, and they can all help drive really great business outcomes. But the way in which they go about it and what's important to them may differ. And you can't just treat everybody like one big homogenous group of people. So you have to, listen and learn from the voices, their voice and what they're sharing with you about what's important to them.
Yeah. And I think, both Becky and Erica hit it right on the nail right on the head. The one thing I will say is that social media, which is highly driven by Gen Z, has changed how we just operate, right? How we get information, how we speak to our employees. It drives how we communicate, and that's all Gen Z. And I think short bursts with details and action steps. Take what we're doing today. This, 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't be doing a live session on social media to be able to drive and get information out there. So it's really being able to drive it. But I think the key point is that understanding that context and history is always needed in order for us to get there. And I think that's the piece where, while we all want to see change, having that context, that history, and that foundation to really help pivot us to where do we need to go is important. So it's exciting. It's not easy, but I think it's necessary. It's going to constantly be what we're dealing with and how to navigate intersectionality in so many different ways.
Right, absolutely. And I love hearing that sentiment of, everybody kind of having that voice and really driving us all forward. But of course, there's still a level of accountability that comes with leaders. And according to some recent Momentive data, 62% of workers consider diversity, equity, and inclusion to be an important factor in their company's ability to drive success. But in contrast, we also found that 48% of C-level executives said the same. But almost half actually went as far as to say that D&I is a distraction from their company's work. So, looking at this data, what is the consequence of leaders being out of touch when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I would offer the consequence is pretty critical, to be honest with you. It is a very, very competitive marketplace for talent right now. And if leaders choose to not hear the voices of employees, to not understand what's important to them, with diversity, equity, inclusion being at the top of that list, and they operate as if it isn't important, their employees will vote with their feet, and they will choose to take their talents, their time and talents somewhere else, and they won't be able to achieve the business outcomes that they so desire achieving. So I would really, really encourage leaders to not think of business outcomes and diversity, equity, and inclusion as mutually exclusive work streams. They should be highly, highly integrated with one, it should be well integrated in just how you operate and the way that the type of workplace you create for your team, as it will help you achieve better outcomes in the end, in my mind. So I think it's wildly short-sighted to see to think that these two things are mutually exclusive.
And Becky, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think, what matters to, I think you've said this, so I'm not repeating, but what matters to employees should matter to the companies and the leaders of those companies. It's clear, it's and if you don't, they will let you know. And I think that's important. Also, I think that the push now for companies and brands to have much more of a view and a speak out on social issues, it's much more expected than it has been in many years before. And I think that's important. And being able as a company to understand where you may not be able to support every issue, you actually can support your employees every time. And so being able to understand what that looks like and the nuance, what that means for your employees, whether that's understanding laws that have been passed and then looking at your benefits to say, hey, how are we looking through that lens? And so I think it's important. It is very short-sighted if you are thinking about this, we should only care about X, because at the end of the day, we should care about our employees, because we cannot, any company, our company, Momentive, you cannot meet your goals without the great employees that you have. And so understanding that is critical.
Yeah, completely agree. It's extremely short-sighted. I think for those leaders that don't believe that this is important, I think it's because it's uncomfortable for them. And I think that it is a topic that they are not quite feeling versed in the same way they might feel about sales numbers or marketing or anything else like that. But I think that's where the work is. And I also think that you are asking your employees to be aligned with the values of the companies. And I think in this case, the employees are asking you to be aligned with their values, right? And what they care about. And so if you're asking that of them, it has to be reciprocal. It's reciprocity in that. So if you're asking them to get aligned behind what the company is believing, the change that they can impact in the world, then they need to have a hard look at what that means on the other side and what that means on how they can be supporting their employees, what the change that they're trying to drive in the world. So I think it's an important topic for folks to reconsider if they aren't considering. And if not, I think it's like Becky said, and like Antoine said, I think you won't have the same workforce that you have currently.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, and to Antoine's earlier point, that's why I think education, coaching, and mentorship of leaders themselves is so important. This is a changing dynamic for everyone, and they are working, they need to work hard to be modern in a modern day environment, and the modern day environment is proving to be a bit more complex. So teaching them how to operate in a more complex environment, giving them space for learning and growth and building their awareness and educating them is really, really important to help bridge that chasm of perspective and get us all working together versus against one another in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think, Becky, and it's a journey. So we're all learning every day about all of the issues that are related to DEI. While in some cases, race and gender may dominate, there are so many other topics that we're all still learning about. And so it's okay not to know. And it's even better to ask when you don't know. But I would say this, but Google is really great about, you go into type anything you want to know in there, you can get as much information as possible. So, but I agree, learning is critical.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And, what advice would each of you have for the HR and diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals who are listening right now, who are really trying to make an impact on this area for their leaders and just in general accelerate their careers?
You go first, Antoine.
I think one of the things I've always said, and folks come to me a lot, I have this document that I use that talks about the competencies of a diversity practitioner. One of the things it talks about is self-awareness. And so if you're looking to increase your impact in the organization, you're looking to increase and accelerate your career, understanding where your triggers are and understanding where you have opportunity to learn. That's one. And I think for me, I would say there are two components that are critical. One is that Becky talked about it, the ability to coach individuals, leaders at various levels to help them see what they may not see, but also to give them some insight. So that's one. And the second thing is getting as sharp as possible on the ability to provide feedback. That is probably one of the toughest things coming out of this role is providing feedback, and being able to provide it in the moment is critical. So I think if you look at those three things together, it gets you in a space where you can help drive change. There's so many smart people around that can program you out of this, but I think those three things have been critical for me in my career. And I think it's the things that I think folks in the DEI space, having those can definitely accelerate your career as well as impact.
I would say too, I definitely think the self-awareness, I love that point. Antoine, I'm going to use that one going forward because I think we don't know everything in this space, either HR or DEI. We are all learning. And so knowing where you still need to be growing and having that self-awareness is really important so that you're not speaking from areas that you don't really know about in that same way, and not being afraid to, turn to someone else or do the research or whatever else that is. I think too, data. I think you cannot be afraid of data. I like to say that it's the mirror for us all. Like I can tell myself anything about anything. I can tell myself I weigh this much. I can tell myself that unless I get on the scale, right? So if you are telling yourself that this is the story of the company, you need to be able to back that up with data. And I know HR, likely DEB, as I've been more focused on it, is very driven in data, even more so these days. And I know HR has recently, over the last, 5 or 10 years, gotten very more data driven. And I want people to embrace that and invite that, to let that inform your decisions and where your priorities are. So important.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with what they've both said already. The two small things I would add is one, listen more than you talk. Listening is how you learn, how you understand people better. So be more focused on listening and understanding than being heard yourself as a leader. And then in terms of impact, picking a few things and doing them really well to start. It's easy to get overly ambitious, and there are so many things to work on and focus on, but in the spirit of doing a few things really well and then gain credibility, and then you can begin to amplify your impact more and more by testing and learning and then expanding the things that you're working on. There are lots of important things to do for sure, but one of the best things you can do for yourself is to always keep a list of really great ideas that are the next thing to get to, but they are the next thing to get to. They're not today's priority, because you never have infinite resources, infinite time. So you have to prioritize what you're going to work on if you want to have a really meaningful impact.
Right. Absolutely. And, definitely the common thread between all three of those answers was the importance of listening and feedback. And that is exactly what informed us developing our new product, Workplace Equity IQ. And Erica, I know Chime is our beta test customer for our Workplace Equity IQ solution. Can you tell us how that process is going so far and what you're most excited about when it comes to this partnership?
I'm really excited for it. I mean, it's been really great to be working with Antoine and the team at Momentive on this project. For me, it is doing the two things that we just talked about, which is data and feedback. So I'm thrilled. The process has been great so far. You know, we've had our kickoff call. We're working through what our surveying of the Chime team will look like, as well as pulling our people metrics and data to align with that. And I'm just really excited for us to be able to use that to get even more focused. Back to Becky's point about what we really need to be focused on. So we're not trying to take on everything, but where in the business can we really focus to make the actions needed in this space. So I'm excited, and I've been loving the process so far.
Yeah, I'm excited as well, and I'm excited because technically we have two of our customers on this call, because Becky was a part of that process of helping us learn and really being able to grow from an internal perspective, and we're continuing to do that. And so that Becky and her team, so thank you for that. That, you know, if you think about our working together, it gives us that insight that helps us as we partner with Chime as well. The other thing I would say I'm most excited about is that the questions that the team asked. They asked some great questions in that kickoff, and that's going to help us. It's going to help them as we continue to drive, and so that's going to be great. I'm excited about that. Looking forward to more time, and looking forward to seeing the day.
I have to come up with a different word than excited. I'm pumped. I mean, this is the fun part. I love being an HR leader and an HR practitioner. I love the work that I do, but I've always said working at Momentive has fundamentally changed the way I operate as a leader because of the nature of our products, how it gives me easy access to data, and how it's really shaped how we make decisions. And this situation is no different. And I get to play this really fun role of, you know, I sit in one chair, but I sit on one side of the chair as a beta customer, digging through my own data, better understanding, you know, my cohorts of talent. And then I move over to this side and I play the role of, I am a target customer. And this is what's going to be really important to this customer, seeing it this way, understanding this. So I get to ask all the what about questions while I'm also digging in, because I'm thinking about what are the practical implications of how I'm going to do this, and how Antoine and I are going to take this data to be even more impactful at Momentive. So it's super, super fun to be able to play that role, and then to be able to share it with other similarly situated leaders who really, really want to improve their game in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is kind of a pay it forward moment that lets us have, you know, amplify our ability to have impact. It's not just within our walls, it's making it available for other people to use this to do great work too, which is all kind of this lovely give back circle that's fun to be part of.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I could not be more excited about this product and this partnership. And it was so amazing to hear each of your perspectives on this topic of the future of human resources. So thank you again so much, Antoine, Becky, and Erica, for joining our live stream today. I know our audience really appreciates it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eliza. Great job.
Thank you again to everybody who tuned in today to hear about the future of HR. We hope you enjoyed this discussion, and to learn more about how Momentive can help you and your organization with all of your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, please head to Momentive AI. Thank you again so much, and have a great rest of your day.